All right, so this is probably going to be our second to last week in the book of First Maccabees, looking at these brothers who God used to liberate Israel, to bring freedom to his people after a very long time of being in either exile or then under a larger nation. There was a time here, and we're getting to it fast, when they were completely free, completely independent of any greater empire. And just a brief review, we ended with this family tree last time, and it's these two branches of the Seleucid family that have been fighting. Antiochus III had two sons, Antiochus, the bad one that we remember as Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, and then his older brother Seleucus. And these two family lines have been fighting all this time, weakening the nation, and it's in a decline as a result. The constant civil wars weakened the Seleucid armies, but they also drained the Seleucid treasuries, and they prevented the Seleucid kings from putting down rebellions and defending their borders. And so the country kind of fell apart around them. And as I said, soon Israel will be completely independent and able finally to focus on building the society that we see in the New Testament. And we'll start seeing more and more events that tie directly into biblical history. And that's when this is going to start getting exciting. But right now, what's important to remember from this chart is that a man named Trypho, who is not listed here, he worked for Alexander Ballas. He was one of Alexander Ballas's commanders or officers. He has taken the young Antiochus VI, the bottom name there, under his wing. And Antiochus VI is still a child. And Trypho took him, brought him out of Arabia, and defeated Demetrius II. So Demetrius II is still alive. He's still out there. He's still fighting for his kingdom. But the one on the throne is officially Antiochus VI, but in reality, very much Trypho. So this is the last paragraph we had on our last handout at the beginning here. After this, Trypho returned from Arabia, and with him the young boy Antiochus, who began to reign and put on the crown. All the troops that Demetrius had cast off, remember he had fired his army, basically because he said, I'm at peace, I don't need you anymore. Terrible mistake. All of the troops that Demetrius had cast off gathered around him, Antiochus, and they fought against Demetrius, and he fled and was routed. Then Jonathan heard that the officers of Demetrius had come to Kadesh in Galilee with a large army, intending to remove him from office. And he went out to meet them, but left his brother Simon in charge of the country. So Demetrius II and Jonathan, just a little while ago, were on very good terms. Jonathan sent troops to help defend Demetrius from a riot, saved his life. But Demetrius had not done what he promised to do in exchange for that help. And the relationships between them had very much soured at this point. And here Jonathan is siding very much with the new king, Antiochus, and who's really just a puppet for Trypho. Trypho is the real man in charge here. But Jonathan went out to meet the army of Demetrius. And his army encamped by the waters of Gennesaret. Gennesaret is mentioned a few times in the Gospels as a place where Jesus went. You see it right down. Let's see if the laser pointer works. Right down here. Can you see that at all? It's dancing. It's tiny. Okay, here's a pen. This is Gennesaret right here. Okay? And actually, Gennesaret can refer to this whole coastland alongside the waters of Gennesaret, which is another name for the Sea of Galilee. Okay? So this is where they were. This is where they camped, which I've completely scribbled out now. They went up this way. The arrow is already there. I don't need to draw another much worse one. The blue line is Jonathan and his army, and they meet at Hazor, the plain of Hazor, early in the morning. They marched there. And behold, the army of the foreigners met him in the plain. They had set an ambush against him in the mountains, but they themselves met him face to face. Then the men in ambush emerged from their places and joined battle. So the army was much bigger than it appeared at first glance. They got them engaged in conflict, and then the rest of the army came out of hiding. And when this happened, all the men with Jonathan fled. Not one of them was left except Mattathias, son of Absalom, and Judas, son of Calphi, commanders of the forces of his army. And this is a pretty obvious exaggeration here. Possibly the men under those commanders are the ones that remained. But a significant portion of his army retreated. And Jonathan rent his garments and put dust on his head and prayed. Then he turned back to the battle against the enemy and routed them, and they fled. When his men who were fleeing saw this, they returned to him and joined him in the pursuit, as far as Kadesh, to their camp. And there they encamped. As many as 3,000 of the foreigners fell that day. So their camp is up here. So this is where they pursued them to after the battle. And then Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. So there were other battles at this time as well, different encounters that Jonathan had with Demetrius's men. But also during this time, Jonathan worked to strengthen Israel politically. He worked on foreign alliances. They already had an alliance with Rome. Jonathan renewed that alliance and the alliance that they had with Sparta, the Greek city-state. Apparently, they actually based their alliance with Sparta on the belief that the Spartans were also descended from Abraham, which is incredibly unlikely. But their relationship with Sparta and with Rome, both of those relationships were very positive, very warm, friendly relationships. And they granted the Jews prestige. It raised them in the eyes of other nations. But as we saw with their Roman alliance, they did very little actual help. But that was a picture of Sparta, the ruins of it, by the way. When Jonathan returned to Jerusalem, he convened the elders of the people and planned with them to build strongholds in Judea, to build the walls of Jerusalem still higher, and to erect a high barrier between the citadel and the city, to separate it from the city, in order to isolate it so that its garrison could neither buy nor sell. So this garrison, the Acra, in Jerusalem is still held by the Hellenists. It's kind of the last stronghold of the Hellenists. And it's been a thorn in their side for ages. And Jonathan, once again, is trying to isolate it so that it can neither buy nor sell, try to starve them out because it is against the wall of the city. Merchants have a reason to go there. There are people there who are very willing to purchase grain, and it apparently had a certain degree of freedom and invulnerability. But yeah, he's finally trying to take care of that problem once and for all. Again, but we'll see if he succeeds. Trypho attempted to become king of Asia after this point and put on the crown and raise his hand against King Antiochus. So this is Trypho's plot. He's using Antiochus as a figurehead, as an excuse to gain power, and this was very common. He's not the only person who did this sort of thing, but really wanting power to himself. Now that he has it, his plan is to do away with Antiochus VI. And yeah, as the picture demonstrates, he's really the one in charge. He's the real king here. And he's either Trypho or Tryphon. Tryphon is more technically correct, I believe. But he wanted to anyway, bump off Antiochus VI and take the kingdom for himself. But he feared that Jonathan might not permit him to do so. Jonathan was an obstacle to this plan, but might make war on him. So he kept seeking to seize and kill him. And he marched forth and came to Bethshan. Jonathan went out to meet him with 40,000 picked fighting men, and he came to Bethshan. When Trypho saw that he had come with a large army, he was afraid to raise his hand against him. So he received him with honor and commended him to all his friends, and gave him gifts, and commanded his friends and his troops to obey him as they would himself. And remember, they are still technically allies. Clearly, they don't trust each other here. And yeah, it's a tense situation, but war has not broken out. And Trypho said to Jonathan, "Why have you wearied all these people when we are not at war? Dismiss them now to their homes, and choose for yourself a few men to stay with you, and come with me to Ptolemais. I will hand it over to you, as well as the other strongholds, and the remaining troops, and all the officials, and I will turn round and go home, for that is why I am here." Jonathan trusted him and did as he said. He sent away the troops, and they returned to the land of Judah. Jonathan kept with himself 3,000 men, 2,000 of whom he left in Galilee, while just 1,000 accompanied him to Ptolemais, which is on the seacoast. But when Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the men of Ptolemais closed the gates and seized him, and all who had entered with him they killed with the sword. So they ambushed the unsuspecting men and slaughtered them as soon as they had finished entering into the city. And the green line here is Jonathan coming up, and the red dotted line, this one, is Trypho coming down, or Tryphon as the map calls him. And they meet here. Trypho convinces him to leave his people behind, to send them back home, and come with him to Ptolemais up here. And that's where they're ambushed, and Jonathan's men were killed. Jonathan was not killed at that time. Although, also on the map you can see there's a line coming down here. Uh, Trypho sent men after the other men that Jonathan sent back home and tried to fight them, but they were able to get away and return back to Simon and let him know everything that had happened. When Simon heard that Trypho had assembled a large army to invade the land of Judah and destroy it, and he saw that the people were trembling and fearful, he went up to Jerusalem, and gathering the people together, he encouraged them, saying, "You yourselves know all that I and my brothers and the house of my father have done for the laws and the sanctuary. You know also the wars and the difficulties that we have seen. By reason of this, all my brothers have perished for the sake of Israel, and I alone am left," which is what they truly believed. They thought Jonathan was dead at this time. They had no reason to believe he wasn't. Oh, look, those lines travel too. Yeah, I won't use those again. I'll just point to the screen if I need to point at something. But, where was I? Yeah, for this reason, all my brothers, Simon said, have perished for the sake of Israel, and I alone am left. And now, far be it from me to spare my life in any time of distress, for I am not better than my brothers. But I will avenge my nation and the sanctuary and your wives and children, for all the nations have gathered together out of hatred to destroy us. The spirit of the people was rekindled when they heard these words, and they answered in a loud voice, "You are our leader, in place of Judas and Jonathan, your brother. Fight our battles, and all that you say to us we will do." So Simon assembled all the warriors and hastened to complete the walls of Jerusalem, and he fortified it on every side. Then Trypho departed from Ptolemais. Remember, he's the dotted red line coming down there. He departed from Ptolemais with a large army to invade the land of Judah. And Jonathan was with him under guard. And Simon encamped at Adida, facing the plain. Trypho learned that Simon had risen up in place of Jonathan his brother, and that he was about to join battle with him. So he sent envoys to him and said, "It is for the money that Jonathan your brother owed the royal treasury in connection with the offices he held that we are detaining him." So Jonathan is still alive. He's our captive. The reason we've done this is because there was a payment we were due for the honors we gave him. The fact that we let him be high priest, that we let him raise an army, that we let him rule. He owed us stuff that he didn't pay us. That's the argument. Send now 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages, so that when released, he will not revolt against us, and we will release him. Simon knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him, is the perspective of the writer of First Maccabees, and it may be quite true. It says he knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him, but he sent to get the money and the sons of Jonathan, lest he arouse great hostility among the people, who might say, "Because Simon did not send him the money and the sons, Jonathan perished." So he sent the sons and 100 talents. But Trypho broke his word and did not release Jonathan, predictably. After this, Trypho came to invade the country and destroy it, and he circled around by the way to Adora. But Simon and his army kept marching alongside him, opposite him, to every place he went. You can see the blue line, which is Simon, kind of follows inside the red line. I lost my place. Here we go. Now the men in the citadel kept sending envoys to Trypho, urging him to come to them by way of the wilderness, so from the south up to Jerusalem, and to send them food. So Trypho got all his cavalry ready to go. But that night a very heavy snow fell, and he did not go because of the snow. He marched off and went into the land of Gilead. When he approached Bacam, you see that right here. He turns northward to help the people in the Acra, the captives holed up in Jerusalem, in the fortress there. Because of the snowfall, he can't go up. Oh, sorry. The red line, I got confused. Yep. The red line is him. He had to go down in the valley right here because of the snowfall, and then went up across the Jordan River into Gilead. And when he approached Bascama, up above the top of this map here, he killed Jonathan. And presumably his sons as well. We have no real record of what happened to them, but almost certainly they also died at this time. And he was buried there. Then Trypho turned back and departed to his own land, accomplishing really absolutely nothing except making Israel not his ally anymore. And Simon sent and took the bones of Jonathan his brother and buried him in Modin, the city of his fathers. All Israel bewailed him with great lamentation and mourned for him many days. And Simon built upon the tomb of his father and his brothers, and made it high so that it might be seen, with polished stone at the front and back. He also erected 7 pyramids, opposite one another, for his father and mother and 4 brothers. And for the pyramids he devised mechanisms, erecting about them great columns. And upon the columns he put suits of armor for a permanent memorial. And beside the suits of armor carved ships, so that they could be seen by all who sail the sea. This is the tomb that he built in Modin. It remains to this day. And there have been a lot of efforts by archaeologists to find this tomb, actually. And some people claim to have found it, but they probably haven't. You can get a lot of internet search results looking it up. But Trypho did carry out his plan. He dealt treacherously with the young king Antiochus. He killed him and became king in his place, putting on the crown of Asia. And he brought great calamity upon the land. But Simon built up the strongholds of Judea and walled them all around, with high towers and great walls and gates and bolts, and he stored food in the strongholds. Simon also chose men and sent them to King Demetrius with a request to grant relief to the country, for all that Trypho did was to plunder. What Trypho did by killing the young Antiochus, it really was idiocy. He killed the legitimate heir to the throne while there was another legitimate heir still alive. He lost his legitimacy. He gave his legitimacy to Demetrius by doing this. And things quickly began to turn against him at this point. So the Jews went to Demetrius, who had been their enemy up to this point, with a request to grant relief to the country, for all that Trypho did was to plunder. King Demetrius sent him a favorable reply to this request and wrote him a letter as follows. King Demetrius, to Simon, the high priest and friend of kings, and to the elders and nation of the Jews, greeting. We have received the gold crown and the palm branch that you sent, and we are ready to make a general peace with you, and to write to our officials to grant you release from tribute. All the grants that we have made to you remain valid. And let the strongholds that you have built be your possession. We pardon any errors and offenses committed to this day, and cancel the crown tax that you owe, and whatever other tax has been collected in Jerusalem shall be collected no longer. And if any of you are qualified to be enrolled in our bodyguard, let them be enrolled, and let there be peace between us. And there have been other statements of peace and granting of favors to Israel by Seleucid leaders. There was something special about this, though. There was a turning point in Israel's history that they recognized, and that Demetrius recognized as well, that they were dealing with each other as separate nations from this point on, that they were no longer subject to the Seleucid kingdom. And in the 170th year, the yoke of the Gentiles was removed from Israel. That's how the author of First Maccabees and the people themselves interpreted these events. And the people began to write in their documents and contracts, in the first year of Simon, the great high priest and commander and leader of the Jews. That was what it was to them, the first year of Simon, the great high priest. A new era of independence for Israel. So, just going back to Daniel, we were there a little bit ago, and really we've been camping out for several weeks now in the area covered by Daniel 11, 33 through 35. So just to go back and remind ourselves, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. In Daniel 11:33, it says, "And those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. Yet they will fall by sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for many days. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in intrigue." In other words, join with them insincerely and plot against them. And some of those who have insight will fall, in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the time of the end, because it is still to come at the appointed time. So everything we've gone over in the past 8 weeks really could have been summed up very quickly. The Seleucid kingdom oppressed the Jews and made it illegal to keep the law of God. The Jews revolted, defeated the Seleucids, and became an independent nation. Long story very short, that's what we've seen happen. But I have opted for the long version, mainly because the short version gives an unrealistic view of how it worked, of history. And an unrealistic view of history gives us unrealistic expectations when it comes to our own time and our own lives. This was not a fast victory. It wasn't an easy victory. And it wasn't without cost. And it wasn't without danger, not just physical danger, but spiritual danger to those involved. Conflict changes us. And that's something that's true of all conflict. Just about every conflict isn't over when you think it is. And it's more difficult than you expect. And you're not the same person coming out.